Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. With me today, I have Debra Rue. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about the conversation, Ross, and I love your work.
Thank you. Well, Debra is based in Virginia in the United States. She is the CEO of Rue Global Impact, Executive Chair of Billion Strong, and that's an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. She's the founder of 4 social enterprises, author of 3 books, from inclusion branding, finding your voice by using social media, and uncovering hidden human capital. So, Debra, I want to start off with, first of all, which was the first social enterprise you founded and why?
Well, I was 28 when I had my first child, and then very quickly had the second child, which was a surprise and a delight. But my first child, when I was 28 years old, was born with Down syndrome. And we did not realize that until she was 4 months old. And the way people started treating her and my family, and I know they were doing it lovingly, but it was more, instead of, oh, you had your first child, oh, she's amazing. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I did not look at it as a tragedy. I actually didn't want people to know she had Down syndrome. I'm just being honest. And so I had to walk that she was a different person who I thought she was going to be, which, by the way, how many parents do that, right? Maybe we can wait and see who they want to be. But yeah, I'd already had her married. She had a PhD. She'd, cured cancer. Who knows what I was thinking? But I had to rethink who this beautiful little soul was. So I think a lot of it started with that experience and really understanding, who are we really? Who are we really? And that was, one of my first part of the journey.
It reminds me of the phrase of when certain events, are they happening to us or for us? And that's just a perspective. And often when we love somebody and people around us see an event happen, our reaction is much more of a reflection of ourselves than that individual of, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, we're not necessarily trained or equipped to how we respond to things that are, maybe difficult or unexpected and things like that. So when you were in your own world going, right, this has happened for us, what a celebration, how do I recalibrate? How do I rethink? How did you change either your own thinking, but then maybe the closest people around you to see it in the same way you do, as a gift, rather than oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Debra? Walk me through a bit of that, because I'm fascinated.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm still not there completely. I'm just being honest, which is one reason why billion-strong.org is so important. And because there are 1.2 to 1.7 billion people living with disabilities, for sure. But then when we step back and we start looking at the intersections, women with disabilities, LGBTQ with disabilities, brown and black people with, and we start looking, and then we look at somebody that loves a person with a disability and somebody that, oh, you're aging into a disability just because I'm in my 60s. And the reality is I don't see as well at night. I don't hear as well. I know that there's technology to support some of those activities, but I have become disabled as I've gotten older, but it's not a negative. But what I didn't realize was, oh, by the way, I already was part of the class. I just didn't know it, in that I'm neurodiverse and I have ADHD, like so many other entrepreneurs, or maybe they have dyslexia. It's 65% of entrepreneurs are neurodiverse, which makes me think, Russ, do we have disabilities, or do we just use our brains differently? So do we need to rethink everything? Is my daughter broken? She's not. My daughter has a very unique perspective of the world, but I haven't completely figured that out, how to do that. But I got a lot of training from the universe when people say, oh, I'm so sorry. It's like, well, and I'll give you, I'll reverse it just for a second. Obviously I'm in this field, but I met this really amazing man. And he told me, he came in the hallway after talking, he said, I have 3 children and they all have autism. And I said, wow, I would love to come and eat dinner with you. Your dinner conversations must be fascinating. And he was sort of taken back, and he was like, they are. We have the most interesting conversations. So he wasn't used to that reaction. He was used to the, oh my God, 3? But the reality is we're all on the spectrum. Come on. And think of the fascinating conversations that family must have, because Greta Thunberg, she is very proudly somebody on the spectrum. And there were people making fun of her about it. And she said, well, it's my superpower. So make fun of me all you want, but I actually am on the head stage of the UN talking about wake up people. So
it's
I'm not there yet.
Isn't it? We're all works in progress, right, Deborah?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and
true.
it is about forward momentum. And I guess one of the things about even our own adaptability is around understanding our context and our environment, where one thing can be seen with a dis, and then another bit in change the environment and it becomes an ability without the dis. So I feel a lot of these things is around finding the room, finding the environment, finding the space and tribe in which whatever abilities we have, whatever gifts we have, can shine in the way that they're supposed to. And what I see is this challenge in society where there's the friction points when the abilities that we expect or that we're used to don't show up, and they're different ones. And is it the society or system that changes, or should it be that person? No, stay over there and do this particular thing, don't come here. And maybe that's this challenge of work at the moment. You know, this challenge where we're trying to look at diversity, we're trying to look at, well, how do we really properly listen? We're not just playing lip service, we're doing it. And are we building the reward systems? Are we building the, communication channels to really allow those disabilities to become super abilities, just changing the room? What's your sort of thoughts on that?
Well, what I think is that we are talking about humans. And it's fascinating to me. I know we like to categorize each other and label each other. And by the way, I think we still have to do that for a little bit longer, because if we each have lived experiences, and our lived experiences are very powerful, but can we be proud of our lived experience? Can I be proud of my lived experience as a mother that raised a daughter with Down syndrome? And let me tell you, she taught me a billion things, but at the same time, can I be proud that my husband recently passed just a month ago, and I'm not going to tear up, but maybe I will, because we're human. So, but I remember as I walked this really hard path with my husband, when he was a child at 11, which I didn't know him, he was hit by a car. He had just gotten his kite going, and I've been there, and you don't want to let the wind, but at the same time, the driver was drunk, and that's not a good thing to do at 10:30 in the morning. And he hit my husband, and he actually killed him. But they revived him. He was in a coma for 10 days. 3 months, didn't go back to school. And what we know is that he had a major traumatic brain injury, even though at the time in society, we weren't calling it that. Well, sadly, as my husband's brain aged, it aged into really bad dementia at a very early age. So we lost him due to dementia. But at the same time, as we walked this path, I would ask my questions, things like, if I'd known that my husband was going, would I? Of course, because I loved this man's soul. He had a beautiful soul. But can I learn who I am and who he is by these difficult walks during the pandemic, for goodness sakes? So, and I know before we went on air, you were talking, Ross, about how you start team meetings very authentically. And I think that is where we're all going now. That's, do we really care about what you're walking, Ross, for example, what your family might be walking, what even your wife's chickens are walking? You mentioned chickens off air, but can we care enough about each other to really allow us to be who we are, especially when we're shifting and changing? And one more comment, you are disabled if you're in a very noisy environment and there's information you need to hear, but you can't hear it. Have you ever been in an airport and the captions weren't working and you wanted to know what was being said, but you couldn't hear it? Well, welcome to being deaf or having hearing loss, right? And it's not a threat. Sometimes we don't have access to all of our senses. And so it's rethinking, it's, you know, like your book says, it's decoding everything, right?
Yeah, it is. And that's, you know, we are complex individuals that when we throw a bunch of them together, there'll be things that we are equipped for and things we're ill-equipped for. And I think one of the things I'm finding is when you allow and say, we're going to accept this way of culture, this way of checking in, this way of allowing people in. But what I'm finding is there is a lot of it that we're ill-equipped to deal with what then comes, right?
That's
so,
right.
you know, and I'm okay with saying that rather than saying, I don't know how to deal with that, so I won't even go there, to say,
right.
I want to learn. I want to learn. How do we show up when there's something as difficult as you've just shared, Deborah, of a loss of a life partner very recently? I spoke at the beginning of 2021 with a lady called Ashley Buggy. And she has an amazing story where she lost her husband in a diving accident. He was a Navy man. They had a young family, and their story reminded me of a film. It actually had Will Smith in it, and it was the title's just going from me. And he lost his daughter. And he ended up writing letters for emotions. So he was writing a letter to love. He was, you know, writing a letter to fear. And his friends played those emotions as if they'd received those letters. And it was, how do we find, it's called Collateral Beauty.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. And so can we find joy in despair? You know, and that is not easy when we're in the moment of all of these things, but you just shared a moment there of just the energy in your face of the joy this person brought you in your life was immense. So when we go through change, we are our own historians.
Yes.
And we can accept these things, acknowledge to be empowered by and freed from, not to be trapped by our history. So thank you for sharing that. I want to hold some space for you in that, you know, the opportunity for us all to live a life where we can see future is what is hardest in our darkest moments. And I have confidence in just the few moments we met and had conversations before that you have inside you the ability and surroundings to break through that. So bringing us back maybe into some work contexts of, we see if everyone's on the spectrum or everyone has abilities or disabilities, depending which side you've got this lens. Why should we really make an effort, you know, to include all of these things in everything? Or should we keep them in areas where we include it? What's your take on how we're answering this question of, oh no, we've got to include everyone in everything? Is that the answer to diversity and inclusion, or what's your makeup? So I'm fascinated to understand your thinking, Deborah.
Well, and my thinking has changed pretty dramatically. And one thing that I believe that we all learned during this pandemic was sort of what our community has been saying all along. We want to be included. Please don't build technology or websites or portals or apps that don't include people that are blind, people that, you know, are neurodiverse, people that are deaf, and you're not captioning your videos. You know, let's make sure everybody's included. Come on, society. People with disabilities are not being included. They're at home, they're alone, they're lonely. And then we all got to walk the pandemic, right? And we're still walking it, right? But society learned oh, this can be lonely, this can be confusing, this can be, my technology is not working, my wife. They started understanding more. A lot of our corporate clients, they started understanding what we were saying. Now we're moving forward and employers are freaked out, and I'm glad, about the great resignation. What do you mean when they did these studies, watch, almost a year ago, right? That 40% of people said, I will not be working where I am today in a year. 40%, the younger generations, once again, I'm 63. And the reason why I say that is because as women, we don't acknowledge our age because it's a youth culture. I can't speak for men, but I want to say to my younger, female, people, all of us, it's okay to be 63. It's okay to have gray hair and put purple in it. It's okay. You can do whatever you want to have fun with your life. But now all of these gigantic employers, this is why they need you, Ross. But it's not just the big corporations, but I'll tell you, they are impacted the most because the younger generation don't want to work for people that they perceive are bad players. And so maybe you're not a bad player, you $1 trillion company, but what are you really doing to add value to society? And so I think what's so interesting about all these moving parts is we've all sort of leveled this playing field. So I used to have corporations say to me, well, Debra, we'll carve out these jobs over here for people with disabilities. And so which ones should we carve out? And I would say, stop it. Have you ever met a person with a disability? Then you've met one person. What?
Yeah.
You can't, there are billions of people in the world that have abilities and disabilities. And then once again, back to those labels, Ross, the LGBT, the women. So do we say to employers, okay, now make sure you include everybody with LGBT in a very meaningful way, which by the way, yes, I agree with that. Oh, make sure you include all people with disabilities, even though we haven't even come together as a community. 80% of people with disabilities, they're invisible. They're invisible disabilities. A lot of people that are part of my community don't even know it, Ross.
Yeah.
So where do you find us, right? So that's why all these moving parts, we have to have these conversations. We have to have you in the conversations talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and how it all ties together, because I think we might all be now sort of in the same boat together, right? And there's some big holes in it.
There is. And I think one of the challenges of just our human biology of, we associate things we don't recognize with fear, with a fear response. We try to look for certainty, and we're living in a world of uncertainty. And we've built up these playbooks that has fostered a behavior for so long. We need to unlearn and rewire some of those behaviors. And it comes not just from, say, decisions, but then also what training is there to help people through that transition. And often we put projects in place, but we don't realize that humans I've got to change my perception of an identity. Or, the second question, I talk about it a lot, that we ask somebody after their name is, so what do you do? And we identify somebody with their job. And now actually a job is so transcendent of, so many different tasks, so many bits. You said, if you've met one person who's disabled, you've met one person. Maybe the reality of job roles, we've labeled them the same, but they're all different, and the different tasks and approaches. So therefore, who can show up in new roles that we don't even know what the title is for them yet, Deborah, that will show up. And at the end of the day, it's about contribution and about value of what are we adding to the mix, adding to the conversation. And I'm interested, this concept of our human potential, and you have a show, Human Potential at Work, 350 odd episodes in it. Mm-hmm. What has been maybe one of the highlights that's stuck in your mind from any of those that kind of references this thought around human potential, especially at work?
And great question, Ross. It's very interesting because I've interviewed some gigantic leaders But some of my most interesting episodes, I just had one where I interviewed a young man who's 15 years old, and his name is, I have to think about it, Okezue. He taught me to say the name, and he's just this brilliant young African-American young man in the United States. He was in middle school, but he's now in high school. And his mother is from Nigeria. And his father, I think, was born in the States. And so I liked the diversity of that. But this young man is brilliant. He has been working on artificial limbs for people with disabilities. He's involved in Harvard, MIT. He's 15. He's 15. When I was 15, yeah, I was not doing these things. So I'm just enthralled with these young people. And he doesn't have a disability, but he's very interested in giving back. And so something is shifting, but those episodes I think are the most interesting. And I'm guilty of, I was telling you before we went on air that one time a lady said to my husband, "Oh, your wife is so nice. I know she's a vice president, but she always speaks to me." And I was like, why would I not speak to you? So it's fascinating with the labels. We have to label each other to understand each other, but we take the labels too far and then we hurt each other with them. But at the same time, I think as we're trying to figure out identities we're very engaged in the States, and not just in the States, but with this, I've got it in my, or I've got it right now on the show. Debra Rue, she, her, hers. Okay. Okay, I'm going to identify to you that I identify as a woman. And I have a lot of my friends saying, they're taking it too far. They're taking it too far. And I said, well, maybe we have to go all the way down into that identity so we can come back and say, oh, Ross, you're just this amazing human being with all these different pieces. But I also think, going back to the workforce, one thing we know for sure is that when people have different lived experiences, they look at problems differently and solve problems differently. So if you're somebody that's trying to, sell products and services, but isn't there advantages to hiring people that think differently and then allowing them to do that?
It's the beautiful paradox, isn't it, between being an expert in something but then realizing that most innovation comes from the naive mind, from somebody coming in who knows nothing and asks the dumb questions, or maybe they were the right questions to be asked at that moment, that everyone else just assumed and didn't go, oh yeah, well, if I relook at that question, last time I thought about that question, I was in college, but the entire blooming world shifted. Do I still think the same thing? What is true now? What is possible? And so I love this opportunity to shift from work being very serious, work being serious about, we have to have this knowledge, we have to have expertise, to where we're in this ambiguous, uncertain, where we need creativity, where we need problem solving from all this diversity, is maybe this permission to play, to play with, who am I? Yes, there are some very serious things that are going on in the world, whether you work at the edge of life, in a lot of the, fire service, police forces, all of these people that are at the fringes of where human life and death situations, through to maybe everything could be treated as life and death and nothing can be. And can we hold that space? In fact, sorry, I just, one of the pieces at the end of my Decoding AQ book is talking about lessons from the Monkey King. And the Monkey King is, this last level in martial arts, where even when you're faced with imminent danger, you can be playful. And so can we bring some of that to work, maybe? That even when we're approaching these difficult things, these difficult subjects, we get stuff wrong. Well, that's surely playing, that's surely learning, and to learn is to be vulnerable. So let me ask you a question then, in terms of, as we are rethinking, where we've had this opportunity of the pandemic that's happened for us, it's gifted us this opportunity to rebuild, to rethink, to decide, what do I want to take with me? What do I want to leave behind? And how do we, support more of an inclusive planet that's not just necessarily, oh, it's people and people are the whole thing, but we look up and realize there are some other things around. There is, animals, there's our planet, there's all of these things. So what's your view around how can we best think maybe at a grander scale of the opportunity that sits in front of us to engage humans in work at a different level?
Well, that's a wonderful question first, an amazing question. And I want to say that once again, the younger generations want us to figure this out, and they're not going to wait for it to be figured out, which I love. And they are going to decide who they're going to work for or not work for. We're already seeing it happen. I have so many of my younger friends that have left big corporate. And I think that's very dangerous for big corporate, right? They need the talent. But as I listen to you talk, and even when you were talking, when we were off air about the work y'all did with the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs for the UN and the volunteers, I think that is the way forward. How can you have this big, gigantic business, or you're doing this, or you're doing that, and you want people to want to come and work with you. But at the same time, when we're working with you, we're living our lives. Somebody might be sick, we might be sick. You don't know if we're caregivers on both sides. We're caring for children, we're caring for our parents. Allow people to be human, allow them to be human, allow them to break down and cry at work. Maybe, as a woman, the worst thing we could do is cry at work. And let me tell you you probably know this. If you make a woman cry at work, you better back away, because if you've made a woman cry at work, that means you made her really mad. And now she's not also mad because you made her cry, because we hate to cry. But let's stop deciding that things make us weak or less valuable. I know for a while they would say, don't say your age on the resume as a woman, because they might think you're childbearing age. And then, so let's stop all that ridiculousness. It is okay for us to bring our entire lived experiences to work, but we don't know that yet, Ross. So we have to not only start talking about it in programs like this and in your book, but we actually have to start bringing, as you said, if you do not start bringing this into the culture to change the cultures, well, you're going to lose the talents. The talents know that now. I think these young people understand the talent, like the Okuzue. Oh my gosh, 15. Do you want this technologist working for you? Yes. But if you're not willing to allow them to bring their entire self to work, then they're not going to work for you. So I would almost like turn it back to you, Ross, and say, what kind of training should we be providing to these major employers that don't understand that we're humanizing work? And that means we bring our personal life to work too.
And it's unsettling, right? It's unsettling because we've built up our systems, our governance, our management of risk, all of these functions to be able to think that retention's good, leaving's bad.
Right.
Can we rewire even our thinking of that? And I talk a lot about the movie industry and, how Hollywood works. Does that actor be owned by that company and all they can do their work in there? And we've seen, if we go across to music, how that stifles creativity, that, you're owned in here, you have to produce to this, we're creating and we're going into this imagination economy where we have to build, incredible amounts of unlearning. You talked about, when is work even done? Microsoft just published a big body of work that they've done where they're seeing this third period during the day where productivity is lifting, and it's coming between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. And it's like, is that unacceptable? Should we, not allow that to happen because it's not in working? What is working hours? Surely that can be designed by an individual. If that works for somebody because they have whatever is in their life, if they are showing up, they're adding to their lives, adding to people around them, they're not corrosive, they're not burning their own bridges and become unhealthy and all of those things, then we should allow structure that gives us this fluidity and flexibility. But it's tough, right? The reality is, for leaders that are trying to herd, objectives, to hit our goals, to go, how do I get these meetings? And there's this time zone, there's this language, there's this piece, there's all of these things I can't hear. It's not easy. So the reality, I think, Deborah, is that we start building those muscles with the easy stuff. We don't go straight into the Olympics, right? The world is operating in the Olympics of all of these things, but we've got to build those muscles, build what can we unlearn easily? What can we build our, psychological safety of supporting someone to say, I hear you. And when I hear you, do I have to come up with an answer, or can I say, I need to think about that, or I need some help, Deborah. Can you help me help you? What does that look like? How can I communicate better with you? Or am I expected, because I have a title or a role, to have the answer? So I think a lot more of this transparency and radical candor to show up when we don't have an answer, to ask questions in a way that's inviting. And that, again, is a skill. So I think what excites me most, Deborah, is the fact that these conversations are going on. These conversations are going on in your shows, in your work, in ours, and these ripples will start to, as you say, youth are making their decisions differently, and it's all shifting, and the pendulum has to always sway to different places to find that beautiful paradox in life that we live in. Before we come to the final pieces, Deborah, I've got two bits for you. One question that I saved for the end, which I'll get that on. But was there anything else that you would have loved for me to ask you, or that you could have shared? And if so, what was that, or what would it be?
Well, I sort of already did share this a little bit, but I want to just reiterate this. I just think you made some really valuable points, because the employers, and I'm just putting all the employers in one bucket, but the reality, the biggest of the big employers they're really scared right now, because they don't understand what the rules are. And so we need people like you coming in and training them to think about this differently. We really do. And then don't forget, we have this thing called, which we were all freaked out about before the pandemic, called AI. AI is going to take every one of our jobs. Well, no, it's not going to take caregiver jobs, for example. But as society, we have decided that caregivers are worthless. We're going to pay them nothing. We're going to give them no benefit, which we're taking care of human beings. I would think there's some value in that. So why don't we rethink? Well, we just have to rethink everything, Russ. And we have to be brave enough to say, why are we doing this? It's stupid. Because I have young people saying to me, I'm being told sort of to shut up and sit down and let the adults talk. Well, I bought into that and I resented it. I hated that. I loved that I looked younger. I love it now. But at the time, I didn't appreciate it because people wouldn't take me seriously. Just shut up. But now the young people aren't waiting for us to take them seriously. These leaders are just doing it. They're just actually showing up and doing the work. And you think about even things like, Ross, you're a white man. Does that mean you're bad? You're a white man. I was married to a white man who I loved. My son is a white man and he has given back so much. So even that kind of crap we're doing to each other. Let's stop it. Let's come together. Let's work together. But we've got to train the employers, and we're not doing it. And they are lost, and they're going to get in more trouble because I think so many of us are waking up and saying, yeah, it's just not going to work for me anymore. So that's why I appreciate your work so much. And sorry to make it for a commercial to you, but it's true. Please go and hire Ross. Yeah. Go and hire him so that you can learn these skills, because if you don't, I don't care how big you are. One thing we've learned in my lifetime, you are not too big to fail. Yeah, we've seen that. I mean, some of these companies that are no longer here, I would never have predicted that, ever.
It's that failure to recognize the need for adaptation. When do we stick with it and know that it's a difference between a dip and a cul-de-sac? Another great Seth Godin book. Are we with perseverance? Will we get out the other side, or is it a cul-de-sac that we actually need to quit this? And changing our relationship with change to navigate the uncertainty, and actually not just do it for coping, do it for surviving, but do it in a place where we can have joy in that uncertainty of those things. And that's not going to be easy. It's going to take a considered approach to understand, where am I? What is working, what isn't working? And each day, giving ourselves permission to shift thought. And that is so hard. I had a thing going on in my mind as you were talking about, when we are faced with something that challenges us, often we get a amygdala hijack response, we go into defense, right? And the immune system of the company squashes it. It's like a whack-a-mole, squash it, doesn't look like it should look, I'm going to hit it. And we build our structures around there. So it's very hard to infiltrate that system. And that is at a brain level. When we see something and we don't recognize it, we squash it out. So when we are hearing something, can we just take a breath? Can we shift from reacting to responding? Can we quieten that amygdala? Can we then engage a different part of our brain and organization to imagine? What if?
Right.
What if it was the way that someone else looked at it that was true? Would we like that? Would we not like that? Is that the kind of world we want to leave for our grandchildren? I mean, I'll share with you, I've been a granddad for now close to 17 years. So I have 6 grandchildren, Debra, by marriage with my beautiful wife. And so each of these things, when we meet people and we look at them and we then try to understand them, we try to do it, but we do that through open conversations to look at what is that whole self, and also respect that not everyone wants to answer a question, might not be in the right space for it or the right time. So I think it's a balance of two things, right? To have our empathy where we can recognize a space, recognize a room. Is it appropriate? Is it not? And if we get it wrong, to be okay with getting it wrong, acknowledge it, and then build back better. And I think that's the sort of realities in organizations where it needs bravery. They're in rabbit in a headlight. They don't necessarily know how. But for me, holding these spaces where they can make genuine mistakes and don't put them hidden in a box, and celebrate those mistakes is, open feedback loops rather than closed feedback loops, so that everyone can share from that, I think is a wonderful opportunity. So the last piece, Debra, I riffed for a bit there, so apologies about that.
So that was powerful, though. It's powerful because that is how we change the world. And that is also where innovation lives. That is where you're having those conversations and allowing people to make mistakes and be vulnerable. That is where innovation and creativity lives. That's where you're going to really allow people to tap into who they are and what their purpose is. And they'll get so excited about working for you and with you. That's how you do it. But the employers don't understand. So Ross, you need to go teach them. They do not understand how to do this. And then once again, now we have artificial intelligence in here too. So we don't even know what it means to be human yet, and we're creating artificial intelligence. How can that get us in trouble? But we're going to do it anyway. That's okay.
And for me, my view is, it's inert till we give it a purpose. How does it augment us to be better us's? And that's a beautiful opportunity that exists. There's no difference between, to me, this piece of technology, I've got a pair of scissors here, I can't cut, and I've now got this tool and I can cut. And with AI, there's things I can't do or that can be done better by leveraging the insights of pattern recognition or whatever it may be that helps us. And it lives in our world already, has done for many decades, but it's now just getting more distributed. So my last question to you, Debra, is when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
Oh, that's a very good question. Gosh, and I wish I had a very fast answer, because during these days, well,
you can take some time.
Well, I'm going to do a really sad one, but the first time I ever experienced a really powerful death was when my husband I walked with my husband to his death, and I hope I'm not sounding morbid, but there was many beautiful things that happened along the way. And one of them asked my husband was actively dying, which I didn't know was a word, actively dying. And of course, hospice stepped in, God bless. Oh, these wonderful souls. But one thing that I did experience that I was fascinated with was we have a dog, it's my husband's dog, and we have a cat. And the cat would not leave my husband's deathbed. We kept scooting her out, go away, go away. And as he transitioned, she moved up his body, meaning she was sleeping at his feet, then his ankles, and on the very last day when my husband passed, we tried to kick her out, but she kept coming in. She was actually laying over my husband, hugging him.
Wow.
She walked
How
him to his,
beautiful.
and the dog was terrified of what was happening. So anyway, that's a weird one, but it was sort of beautiful and traumatic and whoa, but people are walking this every day. I'm a family of 5 kids, and 3 of us, myself and 2 of my sisters, we lost our husbands in 5 months, and they were not elderly, and for different reasons, but you just don't know what souls are walking right now.
Yeah.
But we still have to walk. We still have to change the world. We have to do all this stuff, but we have to give people time to breathe too. So I know that was probably not
It's very honest, Deborah. It's very you. And, we choose all the things we do. We choose what we share. We choose what we do. And our emotions, we are not our emotions. We're observers of our emotions. And that opportunity to, as you said, find some beautiful pieces in it, find some, horrible things in it. All of those things are equally valid to have, to hold, to pass through, to embrace for the versions that we become and the energy flow that flows through the world. Whatever our religious, spiritual, philosophical views are, that's even more diversity in the world that makes it beautiful, that the energy of these souls throughout history continue to live in a variety of ways. And so thank you so much for sharing. I've absolutely been fascinated, joyful conversation, and I'm going to re-listen to this one because there are so many nuggets in the side there, Deborah. And I look forward to a number of conversations with you for some kindred spirits on what the world needs right now and the approaches to make it more inclusive, more human, and one that we're proud to leave behind. So thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you for your work.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalised report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams and organisations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.